so that was kind of cute, right? Not stalker. Yeah. Maybe I'll try that.
Yeah.
Yeah?
It wasn't that creepy.
Yeah, it wasn't that creepy.
Too. All those moves.
I know.
Those booty popping from the guys. I told you. You got it from your dad. So, looks like your boxes are done now. Oh, it's so sad.
Do you have any more stories?
I think I do have one more story. Well, tonight I'm going to tell you a true story. I usually don't share personal stories. I'm one that likes to use sass and humor in lieu of telling personal things, but for tonight I'm going to make an exception in the hopes that through this story I can inspire and teach a little bit about what the Vietnamese people have gone through. So, I'm going to tell you a story about my mother. In 9 months, a human being is conceived, developed, and birthed. In 9 months, pharmacy students, medical students, dental students go through 3 quarters worth of studies. 27 years ago, my mother spent 9 months waiting in a refugee camp to come to the U.S. She left Vietnam in 1984, and I remember this date so distinctly because when I was younger, I found her pocket-sized Bible. And it was in Vietnamese. All the prayers were in Vietnamese, and I can't read Vietnamese. So I just looked at it and thought nothing of it until I opened up the front cover. And inside that front cover, she had written, July 1st, 1984, leave Vietnam. When I left Vietnam, what did I bring? Nothing, only this book. After finding this book, it ignited my curiosity. I had never asked her about coming to America. And after having found this book, I finally asked the right questions. When I asked her, the first thing she told me was coming to America was extremely difficult and very expensive. My grandfather had worked months, working himself to the bone in order to afford just 2 tickets out of Vietnam. But the thing is, at that time, leaving Vietnam was illegal. So what people ended up doing was they took advantage of this fact. There was no police to enforce them to honor their agreements with anyone. So once they were paid, there was no one to say that they actually had to come through for you. So once they got their money, all you could do was and pray that they would help you. It took my mom 3 tries to successfully escape. And the thing is, just because you escape doesn't mean you immediately get to go to America. In order for a refugee to come to America, to set foot on American soil, they have to wait for papers. So those 2 fares, my grandfather had to pick 2 of his 12-member family to leave for God knows how long. These papers could take between months and years to actually get. So when you left, number 1, you didn't know whether or not when you would get reunited with your family, or if you would get reunited with your family. What the US did for these refugees that had escaped and had nowhere to go was that they opened up refugee camps in neighboring countries to Vietnam. Some in Indonesia, some in Thailand, some in Laos. The one that my mother stayed at was in Indonesia. And when she described her living conditions to me, I was astonished. She lived in a barrack, which is essentially just a really big house with only one room. And inside this one room was two beds that lined the width of the house. And she shared those beds and that living condition and that barrack with 25 other families. Can you imagine? You thought your college dorms were bad, you thought they were cramped. That little twin-sized bed, imagine having to sleep in a bed with 25 other families for 9 months or more. The refugees lived off of rationed food. So every month they were given a box of food that they essentially had to divvy up for the whole month. And anything that families sent from Vietnam or from the US in order to help out their families, the Indonesians actually confiscated. I mean, we have to remember that Indonesians, they were impoverished themselves, and they had no loyalties to the Vietnamese. So what they could, they took for themselves. What was rationed to the Vietnamese refugees, that was what they had to live on. My mother, when she talks about the refugee camps, she refers to it as just a moment in her life, just a memory in the past. But personally, I don't see that. Every time we go to a hotel, first thing she does is she checks out all the complimentary goods. The small bottles of lotion, the coffees that they have by the coffee maker. And even though we don't need it, she still takes it anyway. And God forbid if the hotel has complimentary breakfast, she goes bananas. When I was little, I used to be very ashamed. But, I mean, when I was little, I would see all the other grown-ups and all the other adults just go to the breakfast line, grab what they wanted to eat, sit down, eat it, and leave. My mother would pile on this huge plate of food, then spend the next 15 minutes shuttling back and forth, grabbing anything that could be portable. So, yogurt, fruit. One time she left with like 3 bagels, and like I know for a fact she doesn't like bagels that much. What is going on? And when I was little, I was so ashamed because everyone would look at her. But now, knowing what she's gone through, knowing how much has been taken away from her, if I could, I would give her all the bagels in the world. Sometimes I wonder how she could have survived 9 months away from her family. I mean, I moved over here from the East Coast, and sometimes I just miss home so much. But the thing is, I have my phone, I have email, I can Skype my parents whenever. She was in a foreign country, surrounded by no one she knew. And I don't understand how she survived. But she told me she got through it by keeping herself busy. And whenever she could, she would volunteer at the church. That's where she found her refuge. But the majority of her time was actually spent in classes. The U.S. had started this program where they would try to prep the refugees for their new lives in America. So English speaking, English writing, English, did I say speaking? English classes. But the problem is they never taught any of the practical information that someone would need when they got over to America. When I was little, no one told her about sales, so she just assumed that all the stores were too expensive for her. I mean, my dad was making only enough to get us by. So what she did was she would buy fabrics. She would go to the fabric store and she would go to the aisle in the back where it's like $1 a yard fabric. If you've ever been in a fabric store, you know that that fabric is like butt ugly. It is ugly. But that's what she bought. And that's what she made our clothes out of. That's what that dress is made out of. And I mean, she did the best that she could with what she had. She took that fabric, she added weird doily lacy stuff. All the other little girls were wearing their velvet dresses with their Mary Janes and their white socks with their lace at the ankles. Yeah, I checked it out because I was like, why don't I look like that? I look like this. But when I was a kid, it didn't matter to me that the dress was kind of funky. Because my mom had made it for me. She had stitched every part of it with love. And from the outside, that dress might look weird. But in my eyes, it's probably the beautiful dress there is. Because it was the result of a mother doing her best to give her child everything that she could, despite everything that life had handed her. When I look at my mother, I don't see a refugee. I see a loving mother, an optimistic and unbelievably insightful individual. It takes true strength to have gone through what she has and come out completely unjaded. She risked everything, left everyone she knew for a prospect of a better life. And she is one of millions that have done so. Her story is unique, but it is one of millions of similar ones of immigrants leaving, fleeing their country for safety and searching for refuge somewhere else. And they do it for opportunity. That opportunity is a gift that they then bestow on their children. Children like me. There are no words I could say to thank my mother for what she has done for me. No words to give justice to all the sacrifices she has had to make in order to get me to where I am. The only thing I can think to do to repay her is to make her proud and to be relentless. Children of immigrants, we have a responsibility to our parents to make something of ourselves and to make change for the future. Because someone, my mother, and countless other individuals have sacrificed, struggled, and endured in order to give us that chance. The amount of time my mother spent in that refugee camp may tabulate to only 9 months, but periodically I see those 9 months creep into her present. It is embedded in who she is and it is my inspiration to never stop pushing.